I didn't know that moment would split my life in two. I just thought I was late for lunch. The espresso in my hand had gone cold. My sandals clicked nervously on the uneven stones as I turned the corner toward the trattoria, squinting against the hot Italian sun. I had stepped away for barely 15 minutes to clear my head after another pointless argument with Gabriel. And now, my seat was empty. The patio table where his friends had been loudly recounting college pranks was cleared off. The rental car was gone. Only a half-smoked cigar smoldered in an ashtray like the last whisper of their presence. I scanned the alley. Called his name. Nothing. Then my phone buzzed. Gabriel, 2:46 p.m. Maybe you'll finally learn to loosen up. See you back at the hotel. If you figure out how to get there, I didn't move. I just stood there, the message burning my eyes like acid. And then, one by one, the dots disappeared. Blocked. Calls went to voicemail. Texts undelivered. The knot in my stomach hardened into something colder, heavier. I wasn't lost. I wasn't confused. I had just been left. And everyone had watched. An elderly man sweeping the storefront across the street paused mid-motion, sensing the stillness around me. Tourists at the next cafe table whispered, glanced sideways. The world didn't stop, but something inside me had. Gabriel and his friends had driven off and left me behind. On purpose. The fight wasn't even explosive. It was boring. Familiar. I'd asked him to drink less at lunch, his fourth glass of wine. I'd asked if we could skip the next town and head back to the hotel. He said I was micromanaging the vacation. Pete, his college friend, clinked his glass and said, "Dude, your wife's like a walking itinerary." They all laughed. I didn't. I had planned the trip. I booked the tours. I learned enough Italian to get by. I made sure Gabriel's allergy meds were in my bag. And now, as I looked around the sun-bleached square, I had nothing but that bag, a small purse with chapstick, receipts, and no passport. That was in Gabriel's wallet. He'd offered to hold it for safety, just like my credit cards. The only thing left in my control was the breath I took to stop myself from screaming. Inside the trattoria, a teenage waiter watched me approach with hesitant politeness. I asked, in slow English, if he'd seen where the Americans went. He hesitated, then pointed toward the coastal road with an apologetic shrug. They laugh. Then, go. Fast. Something behind my ribs cracked at those words. Laughed. Then go. The humiliation settled in, thick and oily, coating every part of me. I stepped outside and sat on the bench across from the square's tiny church. I could see the saints carved into stone above its door, their blank marble faces looking down with dispassionate stillness. I stared back at them, wondering what they saw when they looked at me. Not a wife. Not a tourist. Just a woman in a sundress, trying not to fall apart. 47 euros and 20 American dollars. That's what I had left after buying a bottle of water and a panini. I spread the coins across my lap in a quiet corner of the town square and started Googling the bus schedule when the signal dropped. No bars. No Wi-Fi. No clue where the nearest embassy was. The town was postcard perfect in daylight, but under the surface, it was a trap. I had no plan. No room. No return flight. No one knew where I was. Or worse, one person did. The man I had married. The man who thought it was funny to abandon me because I'd embarrassed him in front of his friends. Because I asked him to be sober. Because I'd ruined the vibe. A group of teens zipped past on scooters, laughter echoing behind them. In another context, it might have made me smile. But all I could do was grip the armrest of the bench and fight the shake in my hands. This wasn't a joke. This was cruelty, deliberate and personal. And that's when something shifted. Not like lightning. Not some sudden explosion of resolve. More like a slow click, the sound of a gear locking into place. I could sit here and wait for him to come back. Or I could decide this wasn't the end of my story. The sky burned orange as the sun dipped below the tiled rooftops. Shadows grew long. The piazza emptied. I pulled my phone out one more time, not to call him, to open maps. I found the bus stop. And then, with blistered feet and a hollow stomach, I stood. Walked. Not toward the hotel. Not toward Gabriel. Just away. Away from the version of me who always kept things running smoothly. Away from the woman who apologized for asking to be treated with respect. Each step felt heavier and freer at the same time. I didn't know where I was going. But for the first time in years, I was finally choosing to go. The overnight bus out of the Italian village was nearly empty. Just me, an old man in a brown cap sleeping against the window, and a mother with a baby who cried every hour like clockwork. My seat smelled faintly of citrus and sweat, and the air conditioning hissed out a weak, lukewarm stream. I didn't sleep. I just watched the dark countryside roll past, eyes dry, mouth set. If I let myself feel anything, shame, rage, heartbreak, I might lose control. So I didn't. I stayed in that cold, bright place where survival lives. I didn't know where I was going exactly, only that it was far from Gabriel. By sunrise, I'd reached Rome. The bus station was chaotic. Crowds pushing, pigeons fluttering, screens blinking with arrivals and delays. I bought a ticket with the last of my euros, trading up the familiar for the unknown, a ferry to Patras, then a connection toward the coast. Greece. No reason. No plan. Just instinct. Gabriel wouldn't think to look for me there. In Patras, I pawned the last thing I could, the diamond wedding ring. The woman behind the glass counter squinted at the stone, tapped it against a small metal dish, then slid an insultingly low stack of euro notes toward me. I didn't haggle. I didn't cry. I just took the money and walked out. I used some of it to charge my phone and buy a simple SIM card. No social media. No email. Just access to maps and translation apps, survival tools. I stared at my contact list for a long time, thumb hovering over names. Dad. My college roommate, Sarah. My old mentor, Marianne. People who'd warned me about Gabriel in small ways over the years. The ones I'd drifted from because love makes you mute and proud. I didn't call them. Not yet. I wasn't ready to explain what had happened, or worse, to hear that I deserved it. I arrived at a small coastal town I couldn't pronounce, wearing clothes that smelled like bus seats and stress. The sun was harsher here. Dry. Honest. The wind carried the scent of salt and wild herbs. By the second day, my money had thinned to coins. I slept in a cheap hostel with flickering lights and creaking bed springs. I tried to act like a tourist, like someone who belonged, but it was clear I didn't. The hotel clerk asked too many questions. A man at a cafe offered me his number, then insisted on paying for my meal and waiting outside long after I declined both. On the third day, I collapsed. It happened halfway down a dusty footpath, just outside the town limits. I'd followed signs toward an olive grove, thinking I might find shade or maybe someone who would let me work for food. But the sun had been too hot. I hadn't eaten since a dry cheese roll the morning before. My water bottle had been empty since noon. The world blurred. My knees gave way. And then darkness. The first thing I felt was the sensation of a cool hand against my cheek. Then, the murmur of a woman's voice. Gentle. Steady. Not in English. I opened my eyes slowly, and her face came into focus, weathered, kind, lined with sun and time. She spoke again in Greek, and when I didn't answer, she switched to soft gestures. She lifted a canteen to my lips and coaxed me to drink. The water was warm but life-saving. It shocked my throat awake. Elena, she said, pointing to her chest. I tried to sit up. Failed. Alexis, I whispered. Her face brightened. Elena helped me to my feet with surprising strength for someone her size. I leaned heavily on her as she guided me through a grove of olive trees, silver-green leaves flickering in the breeze like coins in sunlight. Up a gentle hill, toward a small stone house tucked between the trees. Shutters thrown open. Laundry fluttering on a line. She wasn't a stranger anymore. She was a rescue. Inside the farmhouse, Everything smelled of garlic and wood smoke. Dried herbs hung from the ceiling beams. A pot simmered on a stove older than my apartment back in Boston. Elena seated me at a rough wooden table and pressed a bowl of soup into my hands. It was simple: lentils, lemon, something green, but I devoured it as if it had been made by angels. She smiled when I finished and poured more. Later, her husband arrived, tall, silent, with olive skin weathered like bark and a silver mustache. Elena introduced him as Nikos. He nodded once, cautiously, his eyes studying me the way one studies a storm on the horizon. Not afraid, just observant. They didn't ask questions. They just offered space. I stayed in a spare room that night. The bed was narrow but warm. Clean clothes folded at the foot, a cotton dress and oversized cardigan that smelled of lavender and old stories. I fell asleep before I could wonder whether I should. The next morning, I tried to leave. I laced my shoes, packed my purse, rehearsed my thank you in Google Translate. But Elena intercepted me at the door. Her face fell. She pointed to my still blistered feet. Then outside, where the sky had darkened with unexpected rain, she touched her chest. "Stay," she said. One of the few English words she knew. And something in her voice, something motherly, unsaid, made me nod. That afternoon, she opened a carved wooden box and showed me a faded photo of a young woman with Elena's eyes and Nikos's smile. In another photo, a baby cradled in unfamiliar arms. She pointed far away, then to the photo, then back to me. "Daughter," she said. "Grandbaby. Australia. No see. Long time." She looked at me with watery eyes. Not with desperation. Not with manipulation. Just longing. That night, I cried for the first time. Not because I was afraid, or alone, or abandoned, but because I was no longer invisible. The days on the farm fell into a rhythm. Wake at sunrise. Feed the chickens. Brew thick, bitter coffee. Walk barefoot through the olive grove while the light filtered through branches like falling coins. The trees whispered as I passed, their ancient silence more comforting than any conversation I'd had in months. I was healing. Not loudly, not dramatically, but steadily, quietly, like moss growing over a wound. I had stopped counting the days since I arrived. Elena taught me everything by doing. No lectures, no instructions, just hands in the soil, gestures, soft corrections. I learned to knead dough for bread by watching the tilt of her wrist. I learned how to hang laundry so it caught the wind without twisting. I learned that patience was its own kind of strength. Nikos barely spoke, but when he did, it was with meaning. He showed me how to prune the olive trees with a slow, deliberate grace. Every cut, he explained through hand signals and soft Greek phrases, was a conversation with the tree, a way to say, "Grow here, not there." One evening, after a long day in the grove, I caught my reflection in the farmhouse mirror, sun-brown skin, loose hair tangled from the wind, dirt under my nails. My old life felt like a dream someone else had. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a guest in my own body. And then it happened. 3 weeks into my quiet new life, Elena knocked gently on my door one evening, holding out her phone with trembling fingers. Her eyes were wide. Concerned. An email. From Gabriel Davis, subject, "I know where you are." My lungs collapsed inward as I read. "It's taken weeks and a private investigator, but I finally tracked you down. This has gone on long enough, Alexis. You've made your point. I'm coming to bring you home. My flight lands in Athens on Thursday. Be ready. Be ready." 2 words that detonated everything I had built here. My hands went cold. The old instincts came roaring back: guilt, panic, the urge to explain myself, to soften the edges of his cruelty. I had fled a ghost, but now it had a name again. A schedule. A plane ticket. Gabriel was coming. I didn't sleep that night. I paced the kitchen, rereading the email until the screen blurred. Every corner of the farmhouse now felt vulnerable, exposed. I imagined him pulling up in a rental car, sunglasses on, that smug smile he used when he knew he had the upper hand. He didn't care that I was safe. He didn't care that I'd survived. He just hated that I'd done it without him. The next morning, I found Nikos in the shed, sorting olives by hand. I told him what was happening, not in full, not in words, but enough. I held up the email, pointed to Gabriel's name, then to my chest. His eyes narrowed. He called for Elena. She arrived within minutes, drying her hands on her apron. I watched her face as I explained. Fear, then anger, then something fiercer, protection. Elena, I whispered. I don't know what to do. She pressed her palm to her heart, then reached beneath the ledger on the kitchen table and pulled out a folded stack of papers. She handed them to me silently. Greek, then English. Legal. Stamped. A partnership agreement. My name. Her name. Nikos's. 1/3 yours, she said softly. This home. This work. Not guest. Not visitor. I stared at the signature line. Mine. Not his. My hand was shaking when I touched the ink. Gabriel was coming for his wife. But he would arrive to find a partner. I didn't run. I didn't hide. Instead, I walked to the village lawyer's office. Katerina, a sharp-eyed woman in her 60s, listened as I explained my story in a patchwork of English and shame. She nodded. Didn't flinch. I've seen worse, she said, pulling out a folder. But not often. We drafted divorce papers. Dual language. Clear, direct, final. That night, I emailed my mentor. The consulting offer from before, was it still open? An hour later, her reply came. If you're ready, it's yours. I was. Not to leave, but to begin again on my terms from this soil. The last thing I did before bed was power up my phone. I hadn't looked at the news, my bank, or my email in weeks. Missed messages flooded in. Friends who thought I'd ghosted them. Clients wondering where I'd gone. People offering help who never knew I needed it. And then, Gabriel. Dozens of emails. Voicemails. Even a photo, a screenshot of the Greek coastline. Can't wait to see you. I miss my wife. I closed the phone and locked it in a drawer. I wasn't his wife anymore. I wasn't his anything. 2 days later, a car appeared at the edge of the farm road. Dust kicked up behind it as the tires crunched gravel. Gabriel had arrived. I watched from the kitchen window as he stepped out in designer sunglasses, his hair too perfect for this heat. He scanned the farmhouse, confused, like a man searching for a resort that didn't exist. Elena appeared beside me, silent, hands folded. You ready? She asked in careful English. I nodded. He wanted a wife waiting by the gate. He was about to meet someone else entirely. Gabriel stepped out of the rental car like he was arriving at a photo shoot. Pressed linen shirt. Polished loafers. Aviators that caught the sun like a flashbulb. He took in the humble stone house, the olive grove, the chickens scratching around the edges of the path, and frowned. This wasn't what he'd expected. It didn't look like a place that kept someone. He opened the car door slowly, like someone preparing to take control of a situation, not realizing control had already left the table. I watched him from the shade of the porch. Work boots laced, fingers still stained from sorting olives that morning. I didn't flinch, but my heart was loud in my ears, not fear. Memory. All the words I hadn't said when he left me behind in Italy. All the things I'd swallowed to keep the peace. They rose in me now, not like rage, but truth. Behind me, I heard the soft shuffle of Elena and Nikos. Silent, present. Not interfering, but witnessing. I stepped forward. Gabriel, I said. His head turned sharply. Recognition bloomed slowly across his face, shifting from surprise to something almost comical. Alexis, he said, lowering his sunglasses. He stared. His eyes flicked over my hair pulled back in a knot, the rolled sleeves of my work shirt, the thick-soled shoes, the tanned skin that no longer belonged to a Boston socialite. What the hell happened to you? There it was. That tone. I didn't answer. I just held his gaze. He took a step closer, arms opening as if expecting me to collapse into them. I'm here to bring you home, he said. Let's not do the scene, okay? You've had your escape. It's time to move on. I blinked. Escape. Whatever this is, he said, waving vaguely at the grove. Some eat, pray, love thing. I get it. You were upset. I shouldn't have left you in Italy. It was a dumb move. I was drunk. But you've made your point. I tilted my head slightly. You think I stayed here to make a point? He frowned, reading me more carefully now. His gaze narrowed. Alexis, he said, lowering his voice, come on. You're not this. You're not a farmer. No, I said quietly. I wasn't. But now I'm someone who plants seeds and watches things grow. I make my own money. I work. I sleep. I eat. I don't cry in bathrooms anymore. His face hardened. You don't belong here. That was the moment something inside me clicked, not loudly, but with the finality of a locked door. You're right, I said. I didn't. But I do now. He paced toward the car, pulling at his collar like the air had turned against him. You realize how ridiculous this is? You left everything. Our life. Our house. Our reputation. Do you know how it looks? People are asking questions. My clients, oh, I said softly. So, this is about your image. He stopped. I continued, stepping off the porch now, boots crunching on gravel. You're not here because you care. You're here because I'm missing from your story, and that's inconvenient. You thought I'd come crawling back. That I'd be grateful you came looking. He threw up his hands. I was looking. I hired a PI for God's sake. You think that was easy? I stared at him. You didn't hire a PI because you missed me. You hired one because you couldn't believe I wasn't waiting. Silence stretched. The grove rustled. A chicken clucked in the distance, unconcerned by the implosion of a marriage. He tried again, softening. Lex, we had a good life. Okay. Boston, the house, the parties, you loved that. No, I said. You loved that. I tolerated it. You tolerated me? I looked him full in the face. You erased me. Slowly. Strategically. You called it love, and I let you, because I didn't want to break something I worked so hard to build. But the truth is you didn't leave me in Italy. You started leaving me long before that. Piece by piece. He exhaled, folding his arms. So what now? You're just going to stay here? Be some farm girl in a village that doesn't even have a Starbucks. I smiled. Not because it was funny, but because it was so him. This place may not have a Starbucks, I said, but it has people who see me. It has work that matters. It has air I can breathe. He shook his head. You've lost your mind. No, I said. I've found it. From my pocket, I pulled out the partnership contract, the one Elena had given me, signed and stamped. This is my life now, I said. 1/3 owner of this farm. Partner. Contributor. He stared at the paper like it was forged. And these, I pulled a second envelope from my bag, the one Katerina had printed for me. Divorce papers. Already filed, I said. His mouth opened, then closed again. His face flushed. For a moment, I saw the version of him who used to call waiters by the wrong name on purpose. The one who once told me I should lose 5 pounds before our anniversary trip. That man was fuming beneath the surface. You're going to regret this, he said finally, voice low. I might, I said. But at least the regrets will be mine. He looked past me at the stone house, at the olive trees, at Elena and Nikos now sitting quietly by the shed as if watching weather roll in. He didn't say goodbye. Just got in the car and slammed the door. The engine turned. The car reversed. Then it was gone, swallowed by the dust. I stood there motionless as the wind moved through the trees. It didn't feel like triumph. It felt like something deeper, still, sacred, solid. Like roots gripping the earth. Elena approached silently and put a hand on my shoulder. No words. Just warmth. And, just like that, I didn't belong to him anymore. I belonged to myself. That night, the wind came in from the sea, restless and fast. It blew through the olive trees like a warning. Their silver leaves flashed under the moonlight, whispering secrets in a language older than pain. I stood barefoot in the garden. The divorce papers Gabriel had refused to take still clutched in my hand. My signature at the bottom, bold and certain, stared up at me like it had been waiting its whole life to exist. Elena had gone to bed early. Nico sat on the porch, rolling a cigarette with quiet hands. I could feel him watching me in that quiet, unintrusive way of his, like one might watch a wildfire in the distance. Curious, reverent, slightly afraid. I had thought the confrontation would be the end. But it wasn't. The real end was what came after the silence. The wait. The final, breathless release. I walked back into the house and pulled open the drawer where I kept my old phone. Still cracked from a fall weeks ago. Still loaded with the life I had walked away from. I powered it up. The lock screen lit up with a photo of Gabriel and me on a rooftop bar in Boston, smiling, wine glasses raised. I stared at it for a long time, like a detective examining a lie in plain sight. We looked perfect. But I remembered that night clearly now. He had snapped at me for ordering the wrong kind of wine. I had laughed it off, smoothed it over, smiled wide for the camera. I pressed the screen. The image disappeared. My inbox was a graveyard of old ghosts. Messages from old clients. Friends I hadn't spoken to since before the wedding. My mentor still checking in. A single unread voicemail from my father. I tapped play. Lex, it's Dad. I heard from Sarah. She said something happened on your trip. You don't have to call back. But we're here. Whenever you're ready. I sat down on the edge of the bed, tears sliding down in perfect silence. I hadn't disappeared. I'd been hiding. And for the first time, I wasn't angry at Gabriel for what he did. I was angry at myself for how long I let him. The next morning, the sky was painted in lavender and rose. A sunrise so soft it almost apologized for the world. I got dressed slowly, buttoned up the work shirt, pulled my hair back, tied my boots. Then I picked up the divorce papers, walked to the back of the grove, and lit them on fire. Not in anger, not in spite, but because I didn't need him to sign anything to be free. The pages curled and blackened in my hand. Flames licked the edges of his name, his signature, his timeline, his control. I dropped the ashes into the soil. Let them feed something new. Later that day, we pressed the first bottles of the season's olive oil. The machine hummed and clattered. Nikos wiped his forehead with a rag. Elena inspected the first glass bottle, holding it up to the light. Good, she said, nodding. Very good. We labeled them by hand, me on one side of the table, Elena on the other. Our fingers moved in sync. A rhythm we'd built without language. She slid a bottle toward me, one with my handwriting on the label. Your first one, she said softly. I held it up, golden green and glowing in the sunlight. It felt heavier than it looked, like memory, like labor, like rebirth. I wasn't crying. I was home. Later that week, I walked to the cafe in the village square. Not because I needed coffee, but because I finally wanted to be seen. The cafe owner, Stavros, greeted me with a nod. Behind the counter, his niece waved. Yana, the weaver from the market, was seated at a side table and pulled out a chair beside her. You came, she said in Greek. I did. She handed me a cup. You look taller. I feel heavier, I said. In a good way? In a real way. She smiled. Then stay heavy. We toasted to that. Quietly. With coffee. When I returned to the farmhouse that evening, Elena was waiting with a small box. Gift, she said. Inside was a leather journal. Handmade. On the inside cover, my name, Alexis, written in elegant, careful Greek. New stories, she said. I stared at it, heart-catching. You think I have more stories left in me? She shrugged. Only way to know is to write them. I walked back outside and sat beneath the old olive tree at the edge of the property. The one with the crooked trunk and thick roots that always seemed to know more than the others. I opened the journal. And I wrote the first line. My husband left me in Italy. And it was the best thing that ever happened to me. I smiled. It wasn't a revenge story. It wasn't even a tragedy. It was the beginning of something. Summer turned slowly to fall. The grove quieted, its vibrant green mellowing into a softer, silver hush. The air smelled of drying herbs and wood smoke. The harvest was over, but the work never stopped. The days were shorter now, cooler, touched with wind. The kind of wind that whispered not endings, but settling. The kind that meant it was time to put things into the earth and let them grow in the dark. I spent the mornings bottling oil. The afternoons walking the perimeter of the grove, pruning back what was tired or overgrown. Nikos had started teaching me the names of every tree. Not by number, by memory. Each had a shape, a rhythm, a history. Some were older than countries. He'd say the name of one aloud and wait. I'd point. If I got it wrong, he'd nod and we'd try again tomorrow. There was no hurry. Only rhythm. And roots. One day, a letter arrived. From Boston. From my old design mentor, Marianne. It was handwritten, elegant, and looped like she always wrote, in the same pen she used to sign contracts and mark up blueprints. Alexis, it began. We've missed you. The project in Madrid is open again. If you're interested, there's a spot. Remote, flexible, creative control. And yours if you want it. I held the letter for a long time, rereading it under the soft kitchen light, Elena peeling apples beside me for a pie that wasn't meant for anyone in particular. I didn't answer the letter right away, because for the first time in my life, I understood something important. Not every door that opens is meant to be walked through. Some are meant to remind you that you're no longer trapped. The partnership agreement still sat in the drawer beneath the ledger. I'd touched it less lately, not because it meant less, but because I no longer needed the proof. This place wasn't something I was clinging to out of fear. It was something I had chosen. With both eyes open. It had started as a shelter. It had become a home. Yana and I began planning a new stall for the winter market, one with woven scarves and olive oil gift sets. She joked that soon we'd be a luxury brand. I told her if we were, it was the kind that came with blistered hands and no refunds. She liked that. Put it on the sign, she said. Luxury with dirt under your nails. One evening, Elena and I sat on the porch after dinner. The air was thick with the sound of crickets and far-off bells. She knit. I read from a novel she'd insisted I try, though neither of us could fully understand the other's language yet. It didn't matter. The stories filled the air anyway. Then she asked, without looking up, "You dream now?" I blinked. What? She touched her chest. Before, no dreams. Only survive. Now. I looked out toward the dark olive grove. The stars above it were cold and brilliant. Not like the Boston skyline, which swallowed the sky. This was ancient sky, patient, unmoving. Like it was waiting for the truth to rise up from the ground. I do, I said. And I meant it. Not dreams like fairy tales. Dreams like real things. Dreams with dirt and weight and bark and scars. Somewhere out there, Gabriel had probably told his version of the story 100 times. That his wife had a breakdown in Italy. That she lost herself. That she ran off with strangers to a village with no cell service and forgot who she was. But I didn't lose myself. I buried the woman he built and uncovered the one he tried to erase. One morning in October, a neighbor's child wandered onto the farm, a curious little girl with mud on her knees and a lopsided braid. She tugged on my sleeve and pointed at one of the trees. "Why do they all look different?" she asked. I smiled. "Because they've all been through something." She tilted her head. "Like people." I nodded. "Exactly like people." She stared at the tree again, thoughtful. Then skipped off without another word. And I stayed there a little longer, brushing my hand along the bark. Its surface was twisted and imperfect. Knotted from weather. But strong. So very strong. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, I wrote the final page of the journal Elena gave me. The one I had filled with crooked Greek, ink smudges, clippings of pressed herbs, receipts, a torn photograph from Italy I had burned halfway through and glued back anyway. The last page was short. Just a sentence. I wasn't saved. I rooted. And beneath it, still growing. The wind returned that night, rustling the trees like laughter. And as I stepped out into it, barefoot and quiet, I realized I no longer feared being alone. Because I wasn't. Not anymore. Not ever again.